Serious, people of Reddit that honestly believe they have been abducted by aliens. What was your experience like? I'm not sure if I'd say I was abducted, but what happened was really weird. Was laying on my couch with a blanket over me and I look at the clock and it says like 11:23 AM or something. Suddenly a white flash happens and it's 12:40 PM. It happens again 3 more times and by the time I could comprehend what was going on it was like 5:30 PM. Every time it would happen there would be like 15 minutes of confusion and trying to move. I was stuck in a dreamlike state until it stopped happening. Edit. Old F. But Ray, reading this I remembered that the only reason I said I was laying under a blanket is because at the very end, once I was able to stand up I was on top of it. I live in a pretty secluded part of Washington state. I was in my late teens and my parents had gone to Seattle for something. So I was put in charge of the property. I was closing everything up, that is, the barn we own and some other small utility buildings, when I look up and see 3 reddish orange lights in a triangular formation. They were just floating there, as if they were magnified stars. So magnified, in fact, that everything was slightly illuminated by their warm hue. I'm mesmerized, standing there, and suddenly lose my sense of balance, as if the ground in front of me has begun rising, and I pass out. Next thing I know I'm on the ground in the barn I had locked up, according to my watch, half an hour before. Needless to say, I was petrified. I scurried to the house with my tail between my legs, scared and confused. I slept not at all that night and any sense of security I had was gone. Even though I was locked safely in my house, I felt hopelessly exposed. In hindsight, I think it's possible I was lightheaded, opened the barn door and fell down, but it still shakes me up thinking about it. About 20 years ago I was walking home from the shops with my dad and we stopped to watch some really odd lights in the sky. There were 2 lights, slightly bigger than the stars, zooming around and orbiting each other, making figure 8 etc. And then they stopped moving, got bigger and bigger until bright light filled the sky and then they were gone. We carried on our journey home. We hadn't stopped for more than 5 minutes. The whole journey should have been 20 minutes. When we got home, my mum was freaking out. We had been gone for 65 minutes. Our watches were both still working but were 45 minutes behind every clock in the house. She had neighbors' friends about looking for us. I don't know what happened to us or what we saw. Maybe nothing. Edit. There was no search party organized. I worded myself badly. My mother simply had nearby neighbors and friends who would lived on near our route home checking to see if they had seen or could see us because it was winter with freezing temperatures outside. It was a dark country road we were walking home along and I was only 8 years old. We also didn't have mobile phones yet and weren't prone to detouring. I was home alone in this little house I lived in the middle of nowhere. It was probably around 2 AM and I was just listening to music, enjoying having the place to myself for a change, when all of a sudden my dogs started going crazy. Normally, when someone pulls in the driveway or comes up to the back door, they go to the door they heard the noise beyond and peek through the blinds to see who it is. But this night they are running all around the house from door to door, barking louder than they ever do. When I stood up to go see what the hell they were on about, I noticed that the whole house seemed to be lit up with a deep blue light, turning into the living room. It became obvious that it was emanating in from each window. I put on my shoes to go outside and see who was out there, but by the time I got out there the light had faded away. There was no sound of a car engine or really anything, and where I lived you could hear a car coming from a mile away. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I had the weirdest sense of fight or flight where neither option seemed viable, like I was frozen to the spot. I wanted to turn around and get back inside, and then I just was right back in the chair I was listening to music in, as if I just blinked and there I was. Don't really like telling people about it because it skeeves me out so bad. Not entirely sure if we were abducted, but my wife, who was a non-believer, and I both have missing time. We were having sex on our bed when we suddenly both came to, and were in totally different places in the room. Not sure how much time had passed, but she looked at me and said, "What the duck just happened?" I said I wasn't sure. Neither of us were scared, and we were both incredibly tired. We decided we would just go to bed and talk about it in the morning. I looked up instances of missing time and a lot of them said the same thing. When they came to, they were just very tired. Knew something was totally weird, but just wanted to go to sleep. Edit. We had a carbon monoxide detector. Fully functional. It was an apt, not a house, so it was routinely checked and up to code at all times. Edit 2. First. For those saying we automatically assumed it was aliens then, no. Please read the first 7 words of my story. We do not know. But just by googling missing time you will find a heavy correlation between that and abduction stories. Secondly, the wife is out of town for the night. I'll throw an edit up in the morning if she wants to chime in about it. Edit 3. Okay. The wife texted me and she wants to add something. It was the day we got engaged. Of course she wanted to add that because I forgot. Oops. She said it was like she fell asleep during sex and she woke up. But she was already sitting up and I was standing at the door. She remembers that we both came into consciousness at the exact same time and were disoriented, but felt like everything was okay. She's hesitant to say aliens, abduction, or even something spiritual, but she exclaimed something happened. Never expected this to blow up in any way, but alas, the detectives of Reddit, my favorite ones have amassed to find the answers. Unfortunately we may never know, but maybe that's what keeps us alive in the first place. They're out there. I had a year-long experience of strange events that I've never been able to explain or have a full memory of. It started in winter working up north on a project. Our crew was put up in a motel 10 minutes outside of the largest town in the area. I somehow got upgraded to a king-size bed with couches. Nice room. Our days were long so I used the couches to stack my clothes in piles. Jeans, hoodies, etc. I had brought my entire desktop computer with me and was in the middle of a massive argument with my ex over Facebook Messenger at 1 AM during the second week up there. At some point I opened my eyes and I was sitting on top of a pile of hoodies on the couch. The time was now 4 AM. I rushed over to the computer. At some point after 1 AM I had stopped typing a sentence midway through. My ex had left a ton of messages throughout the night demanding I answer her back. She also left missed calls and texts on my phone that was still sitting beside the mouse. I figured I had somehow passed out but wasn't sure how I ended up on top of my hoodies on the couch and not just fall into bed. Went to sleep normally for the remaining couple hours before work. A couple of days later a stranger scenario happened. My routine was we'd finish work. I'd come back to the motel around 9 PM. Shower, change, and drive into town for late night dinner at Boston Pizza. Only restaurant open late other than McDonald's. So this particular night I went through my routine. Took a shower, changed, headed for the door. I got to my car and when I turned it on something felt really wrong. I looked at the time. It was now 2 AM. I had no idea how I had lost around 4 hours between showering and getting into my car. It felt weird. My whole body felt weird. I felt violated. Like an abuse victim would describe waking up from being assaulted while passed out. You feel violated but you have no idea what happened. Not a single memory or explanation. I stayed up all night scared shitless trying to figure out what happened. Why was I missing 4 hours? If I had passed out, why didn't I wake up on the floor? Why did I feel violated? Etc. The rest of the project nothing else happened. But once I got back home things started happening that were just as weird. There's more to my experiences if people want to know. It only lasted for about a year. But those 2 events were the starting catalysts. I've never actually figured out what happened but most people I've asked all seem to agree it had to be abduction events. Also a copyright airing. Edit. Wow. This sure blew up. RIP my inbox. I'll try to answer as many replies as possible. Thanks for the gold. These events happened 2011 to 2012. My job at the time also included 4 trips of 3 weeks duration to both that town and another town 40 minutes away from the initial town where the first 2 missing times occurred. In my research I found out the first town where this happened was and is a hotspot for UFO activity. As to the carbon monoxide question, my landlord required it and still does. It gets inspected twice a year along with the smoke detectors. I don't know however if any of the motels and hotels I stayed at had carbon monoxide detectors. Pretty much a few weeks after I started avoiding sleep when I felt the events coming, and would make a point of staying in high populated areas at night. These events stopped and have not returned since. The residual left behind of me not wanting to sleep at night sometimes I chalk up to fear that comes from this event. Same with closing the blinds in all rooms at night. If I want to go to sleep I have no problem doing so since the event. And I haven't experienced any similar dreams since either. I never told anyone this story because I never thought they would believe me. I was home alone one evening and had gone to sleep for the night. I live with my so and 2 indoor cats but she was out of state traveling for business. I woke up in the middle of the night, wasn't sure of time but it was completely dark, because my body was freezing cold. I actually like it cool when I sleep and usually have the temperature around 70 degrees or colder since I live in central Texas. But this was different. I was ice cold but wrapped in blankets. It was middle of summer so evenings aren't cold. When I grabbed my phone to look at the time, it seemed to be off and I pressed the on button but it didn't turn it on. Since I was half asleep, I shrugged this off. I walked out of my bedroom to go adjust the thermostat and noticed that the cats weren't around. This was weird because these furballs are always hanging out in the bed or around the bed. Anyhow, I walked to the thermostat and tried to adjust it but the power to the thermostat, I have a Nest, was nil and the power to the house seemed to be off. I peeked out of the upstairs window to see if any of my neighbors were having power issues and noticed that all of their outdoor lights were working just fine. From the time I woke to this moment was probably 1-2 minutes maximum. I decide to wander downstairs to grab some water but I'm startled when I realize there is a glow of light coming from the first floor. The way my house is situated, I couldn't see the light until I had approached the stairs. I found this odd because the power seemed to be out just upstairs, which didn't make a lot of sense. I started walking down the stairs and began to hear a faint humming noise. The noise had a high pitch to it with arbitrary pulses of low sounds, almost like a muffled weedwhacker that someone is throttling at random. As I continue to walk down the stairs, I spot a dark, slowly moving figure in the room with light at the bottom of the stairs. The next step that I take feels like I walked off the side of a cliff or was sucked into the floor. That is really the best way I can explain it because I don't remember what happened after that moment. I just lost all feeling from my body. My next memory is waking up again to the sound of my phone's alarm. Everything seemed back to normal. I sat there in bed, cats back to being lazy in bed next to me, and tried to think about the 2-minute incident that happened in the middle of the night. I am not a sleepwalker and I was definitely not dreaming. My security systems app shows the time whenever a door is opened or closed. I realized that my security system was disarmed on the app and that the front door had been opened and closed several times throughout the night. I pulled up my security footage from the exterior cameras and was surprised to learn that there was zero footage from the night. Like the motion sensors reacted to a random car driving by around 10 PM and then the next thing is another random car in the morning. So something walked in and out of my front door but the cameras did not capture any footage. My neighbor across the street has a good security system that points at my house so I asked if he can review the footage from his cameras. I told him some made up story about how I thought someone had broken into my truck. Anyway, he said it was weird because when he pulled up the footage from that night, his cameras did not record anything. Just a time gap once again. My first thought was that I was sleepwalking and that the memory was a dream but it just couldn't have been. When I looked out of the window in the middle of the night, I distinctly recall a red pickup truck parked the wrong direction in front of the neighbor's house. I always notice when cars are parked left wheel to curb because I've gotten a ticket for this in the past. Anyhow, the truck was not there before I went to sleep, based on footage. It was there in the morning, based on footage. So the truck was there when I saw it in the middle of the night. I definitely woke up in the middle of the night, cold as ice, no cats, no working phone or thermostat. Saw the truck out of the window and then got warped by something on the stairs. A couple additional things were different in the house. The security system was disarmed and I definitely armed it before going to bed. The light was still on downstairs and that was absolutely off before I went to bed. My whole body smelled like burnt marshmallows. I know this is weird but it's really how it smelled. And lastly, my 55-gallon fish tank that sits at the bottom of the stairs in the entryway was missing 2/3 of the water. Seriously, where the duck did 40+ gallons of water go? The whole area around the tank was bone dry and the fish were fine. I think I was mind ducked by some thirsty aliens. Edit. RIP inbox. Wow guys, this really blew up. I can't believe my top comment is about aliens. This technically didn't happen to me, but I'll share anyway. My mom and grandma were driving in my old suburban neighborhood in the middle of the day. As they came out from passing under a large tree that hung over the road, they heard a really loud noise and looked up and saw what they believed to be a plane about to crash into them. They started screaming and don't remember what happened. They didn't talk about it until months later and thought it was a dream. I don't know if I even believe them, but hey, I thought I would share. I wouldn't say I was abducted, but I have an unexplained loss of time. I was around 10 years old. I was riding around on my bike and it was time to go home for lunch. A direct route through my town would have taken about 10 minutes, but at the time I had a couple bullies that prevented me from taking that path. So no biggie, there is another scenic route that takes about 40 minutes to go around. It was early afternoon. Summertime. I take the scenic route. I make it home almost 7 hours later. The funny thing is I never noticed anything weird until I got home and it was started to get a bit darker. I pedaled all the way and never took any other detours. When I was 4, aliens came in through my bedroom window. I was terrified, but I couldn't move. My sister was asleep in the bed next to me. The aliens had big heads and big black eyes. It was as if I was in a dream, but I was very much awake. I tried to cry out, but I couldn't make a sound. The aliens left and eventually I was able to crawl into my parents' room. Completely freaked out, I didn't talk for 24 hours. My mom was very protective and patient, for which I'm still extremely grateful. It wasn't until I was an adult and heard people's description of sleep paralysis that I had an explanation of what happened to me. Such a relief to understand that what I went through was not abnormal. In spite of this knowledge, a part of me still has trouble letting go of the hallucination that happened to me that night. It's never happened again. My fiance registered sign boyfriend at the time had just gotten home from work. He went into our kitchen and I walked through the bedroom and into the bathroom and just stopped for a moment. I had a weird feeling. I still can't really put a name to it. So I called him and asked him to come here. I walked out of the bedroom and as soon as we came within view of each other, that was it. The next thing we knew, we were both waking up, laying side by side on our bed, flat on our backs, on top of the blankets and still fully dressed down to our shoes. 3 hours had gone by. It was so odd and disorienting. And though we had both just come to, we were extremely tired. We joked about the lost time at first, but the more we thought about it, the more weirded out we became about the whole ordeal. This isn't proof or anything, but I've never been able to think of anything else it could have been. I've posted this story before on other subs, but basically I went to sleep on the top bunk. Woke up because someone was shining light in my eyes. When my eyes adjusted, it was actually some kind of super bright light coming from my bedroom window and flooding the room. I walk over and see a huge triangular craft floating above my apartment. I look down because I was sure everyone on the street would be freaking out. But no, instead they all had this zombie look on their face and drivers were just stopped at green lights and not a single soul was looking up. Suddenly the craft shined one of its other lights onto me and I don't remember anything after that. But here is the kicker. If it was just a dream, that's a logical conclusion. How the duck did I wake up on the bottom bunk, sleepwalking and dreaming at the same time? Also, I somehow climbed down the ladder to go to sleep on the bottom bunk. At any rate, this story always kind of makes my skin crawl whenever I recount it. Might be too late, and I'm not sure I believe this to be what happened anymore, but I certainly believed it as a kid. When I was about 7, my parents and I briefly lived in an apartment in Chicago next door to my dad's old house. For whatever reason, on this night we all slept on the living room floor, in between my parents. Sometime in the middle of the night I woke up and was entranced by an orange glow out one of the windows. We were on the second floor. I wandered the 5 or 10 feet over to it and looked out to see what I believed to be the house next door completely gone, and a spacecraft in its place over an empty lot. I remember just standing there staring at it in disbelief, feeling as though I couldn't move an inch, and it must have felt like I was there for ages. And then bam, I woke up, back between my parents. So it was a dream, you'd think. Except immediately after waking up I rolled over and puked my brains out. I wasn't sick and I don't throw up unless there's a serious stomach virus going on. So it was for an undetermined reason. I won't sit here and claim I was actually abducted. As I got older I started to rationalize that I was probably just scared shitless by the dream, but I always do kind of wonder. Okay, so on the 24th of March, 2015 I walked out of my backyard around 11 PM and I live in boring Oregon. So honestly where I lived it was isolated. I felt like many times there is supposed to be something waiting for me in the backwoods every day. I felt like somebody wanted me to go in the woods and kept sending signals. Whether it was random sounds at night or small glares of light. I kept questioning what the heck could it be that is so obnoxious. I always go there during the day and there is nothing but branches and trees. So 11:25 I wanted to yell into the woods and ask to stop messing around but it was difficult too. I was honestly frozen and I felt paralyzed. I tried to scream for help but no words. I kept walking towards the woods and I felt something grabbed me by the arm and shoved me through the woods. Then I woke up and I thought it was a dream. I went outside of course and went where I was shoved and for the first time in my life I see branches broken and all the leaves on the ground were swept away from each other. I left around that month and the house is still on sale at Century 21 and I plan to go see it this summer and set up a paranormal crew and wait out at night. I honestly think aliens took me and put me back to bed as an experiment.